Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to show off a few things that are looking good here in the Raleigh garden. As you can see, the evergreen dogwood behind me is definitely one of those things on the list. Also, a few little odd jobs I need to do here in the garden. The annuals have finally really started to jump. There's not a lot of color on them yet. There are a few flowers, and the bees are working hard this morning. A few bumblebees out here working hard. But really what happens a lot of times on our new plantings that we put into the ground, we watered them a few times with the city water, with the water hose, and you're just trying to keep them going when it's not raining. But it never puts on the kind of growth that you get from real rainfall. And we've had a few real rains in the last 2 weeks or so, and just out of the blue, things will just start really growing very quickly. So all of our annual borders, annual combinations are starting to come together and look pretty good. It'll be another week or two before they're really full flower, full color. And there are a lot of bees out here, but what it'll be like in 2 or 3 weeks, this is just kind of nothing. By last summer, midsummer, we really, it was just a swarm of native bees out here in the Raleigh garden. But bulb foliage is finally starting to die back. That's one of the main things. It's just this period of time. I talked about it in another video last week. Just this period of time in between your early flowering shrubs, early flowering perennials, early flowering bulbs, and then your summer things really coming into their own. There is a kind of a down period in the garden, and so looking forward to the rest of this bulb foliage dying back to the ground, which it is. You can see it right there in the frame, that it's really starting to finally disappear and get out of the way, and let everything that the summertime things start to perform. Not only are the annuals really starting to show off some color, but the perennials have definitely started to show some color as well. The coneflowers out by the road are showing some color and are lots and lots of buds on them. As stuff starts to move to the left, there's a purple penstemon that's blooming behind that agave. It's been really a kind of a cool color combination, that darker purple with that kind of blue whale's tongue agave combo. It's most of its flowering is kind of done, and it'll just be green most of the rest of the summer there. Agastache starting to bloom. There's a sedum around the bottom of that green penguin pine that has the yellow flowers on it. Lots of the sedum in the garden are blooming right now. Holly is, out here observing the garden this morning. Bee balm, just about full flower on the bee balm. The bees will be all over that this afternoon for sure. Got a Caryopteris on the other side of the fence, and it was the same in a tour video last week in Charlotte. The Caryopteris was blooming in May, which is just really early to be blooming, and it's the same thing is happening here. And we've had this the last 3 years, where I thought that the mid-June flowering seemed early, and now certainly the mid-May flowering definitely seems early. I didn't talk about the Chinese evergreen dogwood from the other side over there. This is Empress of China dogwood. If you haven't followed the channel, this plant's one of the highlights of the garden here in Raleigh, and I guess it's probably reached about 10, 11 feet in height, something like that. At its center, it needs a little bit of pruning. You can see it weeping down. The weight of these flowers are definitely at this point a potentially damage the plant. I could probably stake it. We're gonna get past this flowering in the next few weeks, and then I'm gonna take a little bit of weight off of it, and then it'll be fine. I may have to stake up a piece to get it back up a little bit, since it's been trained into this weeping habit a bit. But this weeping habit's kind of dangerous to it. I don't think this wood is strong enough to support, hold your arm out for 30 minutes and, imagine doing that all that time, holding. But you said the number of flowers on this plant is unbelievable. It is not fully colored up. You think this is full flower, it's not. We're at least another 2 weeks away from these flowers being full size. And then they'll form kind of a reddish fruit that's edible, similar to Kusa dogwoods. But this one, does keep its leaves through the winter time. Liatris, definitely on its way to flowering pretty soon. This is one that the rabbits haven't eaten. The rabbits slow them down. They end up flowering, but what we've noticed is like the first year or two, they're able to eat them down, but they don't kill them. And then eventually they're able to come out so fast and grow so fast that the rabbits can't do anything to them. So it takes if you do have rabbits in Liatris, there'll be a window there where it's a couple years before they're vigorous enough to outpace the rabbits munching on them and love of them. Got an anemone down here that's really out of control, needs a little bit of work for sure. And there's actually a mulberry right here. This is a thing, one of those invasives in our neighborhood. I know some people do like mulberries, but this is a hybrid mulberry between our native mulberry and the Chinese mulberry, and it's just a crazy weed here in the neighborhood. Butterfly bushes have started to show some color. This is definitely an early one that starts to open in the garden. Others are budded up, not blooming yet, but this one always jumps out ahead. It's in a lot of sun out here by the road, and I cut it down in a video, and now it's already 9 feet tall. In one of our maintenance videos last year, I came up here and got the razzmatazz grape running across the top of the door. It was just eating this side of the building, and I always planned on running it right across the top. But sometimes things get out of control, and before you have a chance to do things, you have the best of intentions, but these vines can grow so fast sometimes that you lose control of them. It's easy for that to happen with things like clematis. They just end up in a big pile rather than climbing on something that you intended them to do. But we got this running across last year, and I'm just kind of keeping any little bit that's trying to come down in front of the doors, just cutting those off occasionally and then allowing it to frame. I'll keep them cut away from the front of the window right there. And then I'll allow it to kind of become a little bushy on the end. It does have quite a few grapes on it, and a little bit of this pruning I'm doing will reduce, I think by reducing a few of the grapes that are on it, I'll get some finished. If I allow every single branch on this entire thing to try to fruit, it probably won't go very well. Just not enough energy in this plant to produce the number of grapes, finished grapes, that it's trying to produce. So this little bit of pruning will help with that too, just thinning some of those grape clusters off of it. This one is an interesting grape. It's a tiny little grape, but it's very, very tasty. And I haven't had I had good luck with it at the old house. Here I planted it and let it get out of control. Had to take a kind of a year off from it to get it back under control and get it growing like I wanted it to grow, and now it is. The other thing the rainfall really did was get our vegetable garden going, and I mean truly going. And we went out of town for a few days here and there, and all kinds of other projects going on out here. And all of a sudden looked in here, and the tomatoes were at the top, right near the top of the cattle panels, and they had crazy numbers of suckers on them. And sucker is just, in the joint on these vining tomatoes, where the vine is growing, the big part of the vine is growing right there in that little area right there. That is a sucker, and that will start producing a new vine. It can just be popped out of there. And I don't take every sucker out, but I do take a good portion of them out, because they keep branching and branching and branching and branching, and then you end up with really wild plants that are very, very hard to control. So I try to come through here and pop the vast majority of the suckers out. If they've suckered and I kind of missed it and it ends up as, this was definitely one of these two is a sucker somewhere down in the plant, right? These two vining pieces that are coming up. Once I've missed it that far, actually I can see this one. So I could cut it out. I could cut it out further down if I wanted to. You don't have to get them all, but I would recommend that you get some. Here's right here at this very top of this new growth right here. There's one. They pop out when they're small like this. They pop out really easily. If they get larger, you probably need to cut them out with a pair of pruners. So I just limit the amount of branching this plant's doing, because if it ends up with so many branches that it grows so wild and the plant gets so thick and it can't breathe, air can't move through it. You got all kinds of hiding places for problems. But we're on our way. Tomatoes are forming everywhere. Flowers are all over them. I'm sure my time in here yesterday, tomatoes are self-pollinating, but if you get in here and kind of shake this cattle panel and prune on them and that kind of thing, it kind of ensures that every flower's definitely getting pollinated. A lot of our dahlias are now up. You can't quite see them yet, but they'll end up about this tall, and you will be able to see them as kind of a backstop or a behind the tomatoes here. But they're on their way, getting going. Lots of flowers coming. Same thing on the peppers down here. They're flowering, and I think that plant was one, we started that from seed. It was 4 inches tall when it went in the ground a few weeks ago, and now it's 2 feet tall and flowering. So I judge fertilizing on performance. Okay, I don't judge fertilizing because it's just, I don't go out and get a tomato fertilizer and just start fertilizing tomatoes every week or every 10 days or whatever. These things have grown 1.5 feet this week. They're clearly telling me that they don't need anything. They're good to go. We've gotten rainfall. They're on their way. This bed was recomposted. The only time I would actually refertilize these tomatoes is if I saw a slowdown, if I saw that they weren't performing as vigorously as I would like. I might hit them with a small amount of tomato fertilizer. But I judge, I'm looking around the garden right now, all the annuals are going like mad. Tomatoes are going like mad, cucumbers, peppers, everything's just growing like mad. Why would I need to fertilize it? It's telling me it doesn't need any fertilizer. So I'm just kind of read the room, read the signs, and fertilize based on what you're visually seeing. And I think that would be helpful in how to determine it. Most pruning on shrubs, you just kind of you can do after they finish flowering, and then you don't have to worry about what time of year it is necessarily. And then there are a lot of shrubs that really benefit from being pruned hard in the winter, and I've shown a lot of those off on the channel. That Caryopteris I was talking about that's flowering out by the front fence way too early, that's an example of one I can just cut down to the ground almost in the winter time, and it will come back to about 3 feet in height and bloom again that following year. And then things like my camellias, I can prune them in the late winter, early spring. My Camellia sasanquas I can get on pretty early in March. My Camellia japonicas, they may still be blooming a bit at that point. But as soon as they're finished, I can prune them. Once we start getting closer and closer and closer to summer, I don't do as much of that general pruning. I will on something like a boxwood early summer, something that I'm not relying on for flowering ever if it needs control. But I will do what I would call sculptive pruning, like taking out a wild limb branch here or there. This October Magic Ruby camellia, which is just one of our absolute favorites. It's got a few limbs sticking up above everything else, and I can track those, down into the plant just a bit and prune those out and have the plant, look a bit more uniform. I'm not trying to meatball it, but I am trying to get some of the growth that's just clearly going to get, for some reason, it's just trying to get taller than everything else. And then if I've got something sticking out on a path like this, and it's still a vigorous growing branch, I'll go back to a bud further along the stem and, cut it off. I'll eventually cut some of this off as well, but I won't have to this season. I've still got plenty of path space. There's a really interesting Nandina down beside this. It's a little, this one's been stepped on a few times over the years and it has survived us, backing up. Because when I'm doing these videos, sometimes I'm standing on something by accident, talking, running my mouth. But you can see this camellia is causing it some issues. And so I'll come in here and just, again, what I'm doing is just sculpting a few plants to allow other things to breathe a bit. And not hurting the camellia in any way, shape, or form. We'll eventually move this Nandina out of here to another spot. But for now, it now has a little bit of room to breathe. I didn't cause any problem. I didn't really change the shape of the camellia at all. And now doesn't have the crazy limbs sticking up. The Nandina's rescued. So that's what I'm doing. Just kind of literally like sculptive pruning is what I would call it. The windmill palm and the October Magic Orchid camellia have decided to really go to battle here. They're no longer no longer separate plants. And so I would like, again, I like to, we have this garden planted pretty close together, but I don't really want things just kind of growing right through the middle of one another. And it's kind of easy. It's time at this point. I've left a lot of these lower pieces on this palm over the years just to collect energy. It has finally, 4 years into this project, really started to grow very quickly. And the actual palm now is about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. By actual palm, I mean the woody-like part down here at the bottom is the actual palm. These fronds sticking up above it are beautiful, but they're not actually how we would measure a palm. We actually measure it from where that foliage is actually coming out of the top of it. When we planted it, it was only like this high, and now again it's up about waist high at this point. And so some of these bottom fronds that are invading the camellia, I'm going to take off. Make sure your pruners are super sharp for this job, and you might want to wear gloves because these things are actually they'll shred you a bit. They've got kind of a thorny edge to them. Well, I don't think you'll be able to see it on camera, but they can get you. If you try hard enough, they can get you. If you spend enough time. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead. Should I go ahead and take that one, Steph? Yeah, maybe. Yes. Okay. All right, so that was what, 4 we took off of it. I'll probably grab 1 or 2 off the other side as well. And now just like that, the camellia and it are no longer right up against one another. And I'll go through here on this camellia, do the same thing that I did on the October Magic Ruby, and just grab a few of these branches that are heading outside of the general area of the plant. Again, not gonna sit here and shear the thing off and turn it into a meatball. Just want to keep a natural look while controlling some of the vigorous growth that it has. It's trying to eat my fatsia back here. The camellia is eating the fatsia, the palm was eating the camellia. So that's how that was going. And so I think overall this type of kind of sculptive pruning, immediately improves the space. And if it doesn't improve it right away, it will in a few weeks, because these things will start to put on a little bit of growth again, and it'll get back to looking natural. These little Bonnie Spirea have finished a first heavy flowering. They were solid pink a couple of weeks ago. You can see the spent flowers left on them here. These will, with a little bit of pruning, put on another flush, and we'll do some additional flowering. Won't be quite as heavy as the first flowering, but I can get them to reflower. It's another plant that I don't really want to meatball all that much. They kind of grow in a low dome shape anyway, but I don't dislike a little bit of wildness to this space. I've got more formal things out in front of it. We've allowed this to kind of be a little bit more wild back here. So I'll just go through, and any of these, this probably be easier with a pair of hand pruners to go through and deadhead each of these ones where the flowers are completely spent at this point. That way, I could go across here and do this and just kind of, again, meatball the whole thing. It's just a faster approach to it for sure. But it's pretty easy to come in here with a pair of hand pruners and just very quickly take down the totally spent flower buds at this point. And I'll just cut them further down in the plant, because I don't want to see that cut at all. I want to see the new growth emerge from inside the plant just a bit. That's why I'm chasing it down in there a little further. These little Bonnie Spirea had aphids on them a few weeks ago, and I always get the question, my Spirea has aphids, my zinnias have aphids. I got a few aphids on a couple zinnias over there right now. This plant has this problem, this plant has that problem. I want to show you what we did while our Spirea had aphids. So problems happen in your garden and the world keeps going. That's the point of that little joke there about all the things we were doing while our Spirea had aphids. Problems are going to come to the garden earlier in the season than the fixes for those problems. So one day I came over here and realized that every bud on this Spirea, right up under it where it was, the flower buds were forming, there were aphids all along the stems. Literally like 3 days later, every aphid was gone. They were completely clean. I don't know what did it. I have no idea. It could have been a ladybug, ladybugs. It could have been birds. It could have been, I don't know what it was that took them out, but they were gone. And you know, it doesn't always happen that way. That's not the way everything always happens, but I am not going to go through a cycle of spraying something and trying to figure it out all the time and trying to make everything perfect out here in the garden. The garden's part of nature, and nature's gonna have its way sometimes. Leaves are gonna get eaten, holes are gonna be in things. I don't need the place to be perfect, and there's a bit of a joke around what we do when we have an issue in the garden. My next stage would be to tear that plant out. If that plant had aphids and nothing came along and did anything about it, it just constantly had some sort of mites, aphids, thrips, I don't care what it is, leaf spot problems, the problems that's driving you nuts, I would just take the plant out. And so these Spirea were clean, bloomed beautifully, did everything that what I would ask of them out here in the garden, and I'm just coming along and doing a little bit of pruning on them now. So there's a few of the things that we're working on in the garden, just a little bit of sculptive pruning, putting things back in shape, in some cases, we'll rescue plants, like on the Empress of China dogwood, once it's finished flowering here. So it could be that, it could be threat to itself, where it's put on so much growth during the spring that it's pulling itself down. And you know, those are just kind of signs. You either need to stake that branch or get it cut back a bit, take some weight off of it, because a rain or thunderstorm or something's gonna come along and potentially damage it. So thank you guys so much for following along with the channel,